Hi everybody, it's Chris Frame here and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm coming to you from on board the Queen Elizabeth, which is just about to make its way into Sydney Harbour to celebrate 100 years of Cunard sailing to Australia. 100 years ago in 1924, the first Cunard mainline ship, the Albania, visited Australia on a voyage that would change the connection between Cunard and Australia forever. This voyage was primarily a cargo voyage. The ship was carrying wool between the various Australian ports and then sailed back to the United Kingdom. And when she left Australia, she was carrying with her a number of passengers who were going to take the ship back to the UK. And this started a connection between Cunard and Australia that has endured for 100 years. In 1925, Cunard brought their first world cruise to Australia when Corinthia visited here during her global circumnavigation. This was the first world cruise for Cunard Line that included Australia as a destination. And during the ship's visit here, they did undertake some events that you might associate with modern day cruising, such as taking passengers on shore tours, but the style of shore tour was very different to what it is today. In fact, in Sydney there was a fleet of motor cars that were waiting for passengers to drive them around the city and then take them for a scenic tour of Taronga Park. One of the things I find interesting is when you look at the archival photographs, you can see how people used to dress up in winter clothing, but it was the warm Australian sun that was baking down on them, so it was quite different from what they were perhaps expecting, having come from the Northern Hemisphere. Cunard built its connection with Australia even stronger when Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth were sent to Australia for conversion into troop carriers for their World War II service. Queen Mary in fact was sent here first, and she arrived in Sydney Harbour where she was given a refurbishment by the Cockatoo Island dry dock workers, who transformed the ship into what was then the largest troop carrier in the world. Her sister ship, Queen Elizabeth, which was even larger, had been refurbished in Singapore, and she was sent to Australia to rendezvous with Queen Mary. But when she arrived here, the Cockatoo dry dock workers identified a number of defects in the work that was done in Singapore, so they actually fixed it in Sydney before the ship was used in a trooping capacity. These two ships would operate as troop transports, taking Australian servicemen to the Middle East and repatriating people after their service had completed. They also were joined by the Cunard Aquitania and the Second Mauritania on these services. In the post-World War II era, Cunard became instrumental in the Australian immigration story when it operated ships under the Assisted Passage Scheme. Cunard had merged with White Star Line prior to the war, and one of the ships that they had acquired as part of this merger was the Georgic, and although she had been heavily damaged during World War II when she was bombed off the Gulf of Suez, the ship was returned to service after a refurbishment at the Holland and Wolff shipyard and put into service as an Australian immigration ship. She would run on the Australian service and was a regular sight in Australian ports. In the 1970s, Cunard sent their new flagship QE2 on world cruises, and she visited Australia for the first time in 1978. QE2 would actually visit many times since then, and in fact in 2008 when she made her final call, she did so 30 years to the day of her first call back in the 1970s. QE2 became a very popular ship, and Cunard increased its presence in Australia. They also sent the Sagafjord here on world cruises, and in one particular occasion the Sagafjord and QE2 rendezvoused in Sydney Harbour. In order to bring passengers across from the United Kingdom to join the two ships here, Cunard chartered the Concorde, and the Concorde actually broke the speed record from the Europe to Australia service on that particular Cunard flight, despite making stops for fuel and also doing a flypast in Perth and in Sydney. In the 1990s, Cunard opened a headquarters in Sydney on Kent Street, and this was a precursor to them establishing a cruising presence here with the Cunard Crown Monarch as part of their joint venture with Crown Cruise Line. Following this, the company gained a great deal of insight into how Australians liked to cruise, which was very important for the 1998 acquisition of the company by Carnival Corporation, because they then set about building a new fleet of Queens which would spend a lot of time in Australia. The first of that was Queen Mary II, which entered service in 2004, and in 2007 she was sent on her first ever world cruise. She would rendezvous with QE2 in Sydney Harbour, marking the first time since World War II that two Cunard Queens had been in Sydney Harbour at the same time. This was a remarkable event. It threw everybody, the authorities included, off guard, and I made an entirely separate video about that experience, which I've linked in the info card in the description below. But needless to say, it was a remarkable moment in time where the two ships were the centrepiece in a harbour that already has the iconic Harbour Bridge and Opera House. QE2 went on to retire, passing on the baton to Queen Victoria, Queen Mary II and Queen Elizabeth. We now of course have Queen Elizabeth making this historic 100th anniversary visit, but they are sending Queen Anne on a world cruise where she will visit Australia for the first time next year as well. So Cunard's connection with Australia will remain strong. And I find it really interesting to think that a company like Cunard, which is known for its transatlantic services, have been in Australia for longer than the Sydney Opera House and the Sydney Harbour Bridge have even existed, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, don't forget to give it a like, and if you are interested in more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel. I have heaps of content on my channel and I would love to have you on board. Thanks once again for watching, and until next time, I hope to see you on board.